Well, good evening and welcome to Psych Coffee Shop. I'm Aeson Knight. Of course, we've got Techy Joe in the co-host seat, and we've got a great guest tonight. We've got Mike Anthony here, and he worked at Hamilton. He's been part of the American Musicians. He was a bartender there, which was a lot of different history going on. Now he has a new book out, and also a lovely Netflix show. So let's bring him up to the main screen. Hello, everyone. As you know, when authors are on, we'll take care of everything after it. All right. So tell us a little bit about how it was working at the Hamilton.
Working at Hamilton was an amazing experience. I work as a bartender. You know, I took a job as a Broadway bartender when I moved to New York as a day job, assuming I'd be there for a few months until my acting career really took off. And then 15 years later, I was still behind the bar at Hamilton, but I would not change a thing about how that all went. Hamilton, as you know, people are aware, is an extraordinary piece of art, like a once in a generation kind of a show, and being able to witness it every day up close was a real gift, just a real blessing.
Now, were you there when they were making the news of, like, I don't remember who the snobby one was that walked out. Were you there for that?
You might be talking about, are you talking about Mike Pence, maybe?
Yes.
Yes, I was there for that, and that's actually where the book that I wrote about it started. I started sharing. I shared a post about an interaction I had with Mike Pence that night, and it went viral. And then after that, I started sharing stories all the time about the things I was witnessing. So, yeah, that night was how it began, really.
So what's his drink?
He didn't drink while he was, as far as I know. I'm not sure. That might not be very. He's a super duper religious guy, and I don't know if that plays into his drinking preferences or not. But he was not drinking that evening anyway.
Well, there goes his liability issue. What have been some of the fun things you've seen, or supernatural things that you've seen during bartending, especially theater, because it's historical theater also?
Yeah, there are a ton of stories about, Broadway theaters are typically fairly old, and there's so much energy built up in a theater that if psychic manifestations are a real thing, it makes sense to me that theaters are a place where they would manifest a lot. I personally haven't seen a whole lot, but someone that I work with, actually not long before we shut down for COVID, had a blood-curdling experience at the Richard Rodgers. He's the guy who closes up the theater every night. His name's Joseph. So he was all by himself in the theater one night, literally completely alone in a 1,300-seat theater. And he had just turned off the stage lights, so it's basically dark in the theater. And he was coming down the steps off of the stage into the orchestra level, and he heard a scream coming from what sounded like 10 feet away from him. And of course he jumped and he turned on his flashlight, and there's nothing there. He's totally alone. So he darted out of the theater. And there are tons of stories of people seeing apparitions and things like that up in the back. Personally, I haven't had one of those yet.
Well, and my thought on it is, I never get a chance to go to the theater. I love going to the theater. I think, in the afterlife, sure, I'll go check out a theater here and a theater there,
Yeah, tickets are so hard to get for Hamilton that, being a dead person, it's like that's one of the easiest ways right now to get into the theater.
Now, if Mediumship would work so well to where you could just tap into the ghost watching Hamilton, you could enjoy the show from home. No, we won't go into that because that could get into some problems for you. Oh, goodness.
Oh.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what one of the things is. So that was your first book. How was the writing experience? Did it go smoothly for you?
Yeah, the first book kind of came together over just kind of organically, because initially, like I said, I was just sharing stories on Facebook, and they were initially intended for my mom and my family, basically, until they started to get shared more widely. And so the book is largely a collection of those stories. The second book, which is called Love, Dad, How My father died, then told me he didn't. That came together really just over this past year after the theater shut down, so I had time to write it. The Netflix series Surviving Death came out. But that series kind of just scratches the surface. I have a feeling that for people that listen to your show, that they probably already are aware of a lot of the stuff that's in the Netflix series.
Some of it, yeah. Some of it, you gotta. This is one of those fun things about being global. That Netflix series may just be appearing now in India, or may just be happening here. So that's why I'm like, let's lead in, let's build up to it, because you've got also your own documentary you're under series with, which I think will be awesome. Surviving Death, and this is what happens with a lot of them that I see. And you're saying it just scratches the surface. I think it scratches the surface and then puts it into a happy meal for you.
Yeah.
So, Love Dad, how close were you with with your father?
Very close. Very close. My dad, my whole family is very close, but my dad, he was a really special guy. He had this innate goodness about him that was very rare. He just a special human being, and losing him, first of all, it was a complete shock. He was 60 years old, but he was a young 60. He worked as a delivery man for FedEx, which is a very active job.
Right.
We thought if anyone in our family could make 100, it was going to be him. So it was a complete shock, and it just shattered us.
Right. How did you learn about it? Was it the phone call? Was it quick? I feel like it was quick, but
yes.
How did it come about?
Yeah, it was very quick. It was from our perspective, out of nowhere. I was at work, so I was bartending, and it was like a minute before intermission, and I get the phone call from my sister, and she's screaming, and my mom, they're wailing on the phone, saying he's gone, and then I like went into autopilot. I still so bizarre. I have this memory. I hang up, and now I'm descended upon by 500 people, and I remember making drinks. I'm like making a rum and coke and asking this woman, are you enjoying the show? How's the show? Like, just totally in shock, I think.
I think we go into muscle memory a lot of times when we hit that hard, fast grief, or even when it's long-term grief. Like my dad, he was around for 11 more years than he should have been, and you go into autopilot. It's like I can remember Dad passing, hospice nurse here, and I'm like, so do y'all want dinner? Let me go get it cooked for you.
Yeah.
And you just roll with that for a little while, and then there's a crash moment.
Yes, and I definitely had. Yeah, after getting that call, and then go into all of the logistics of getting the services ready and all of that, and there's this whirlwind of activity and family visiting, and then not long after the funeral, I was driving back to New York. My family lives in Connecticut, and I was alone for the first time in the car. And that's when the weight of his absence and the reality of it, like the idea that I was never going to be able to pick up the phone and call him again really hit me. And I was like, started sobbing in the car. I mean, it was it really hit me all at once.
And it does. And do you find yourself at times reaching for the cell phone?
A lot. And, I'll have dreams a lot about him, a lot. And in most of them, I have forgotten that he's not alive. He's alive again. And so I'll wake up, and how for a moment you're in that hypnagogic, half awake, half asleep state. And I wake up and yes, definitely. And and he's alive again in my mind for a second. So yeah, I definitely have those moments for sure. Of course, now I feel like he really truly is still alive, just in a different form after all of the journey that I went through. So that's where I am now.
You write about seeing your father's body in a casket for the first time.
Yeah.
And how it felt. And then you write more about going through that emotional shift of like, okay, they're no longer corporeal, and you just talked about it a minute ago. What is the one thing you remember from that scene?
It was the most surreal image of my life, walking into the funeral home and seeing him in that casket. It was so just bizarre because it looked like my dad. It still had the shape of my dad, but it was so not my dad anymore. And I was struck with the thought that, if I had a microscope right now that was strong enough and I looked at my dad under the microscope, it would look exactly the same. His protons, neutrons, and electrons, all of his atoms would look exactly the same right now as they did a few days ago. So what is it that gave those atoms their dadness that they had before his heart stopped beating? And how could just a heart stopping make that big of a difference? That really hit me.
Yeah. And it really dug into you because you even started looking at the scientists of the science, and you had planned on being, what I call your fallback job was a science teacher.
That's
so
right.
That's right. The the initial scientific behavior there. So what gave you the move to researching after death?
It fell into my life. Often people will seek out a medium when they're grieving. In our case, the medium came to us, which was sort of a unique situation. This complete stranger, a woman that we've still never met to this day, who is a medium, she contacted our family through a second cousin of ours, saying that my dad, out of body, was tapping her on the shoulder, desperate to get a message to us that he was okay. And so a phone call came into our house. My mom picked up the phone one night, and there was a second cousin of ours that we barely knew saying, hey, your mom is a medium, and she had your ex-husband Robert here, and he needs you to know you're okay. So that's what brought mediumship into my life.
Okay. What was your thoughts beforehand?
It was something that interested me. I remembered it mostly from John Edwards' Crossing Over when I was in high school. That was a big show on television, and I was really interested in it. But it was a television show, so I had no idea how produced it was. I would need a lot more personal evidence. That's the scientific part of my brain before I believe it. But I was intrigued, and watching the people that he was doing the readings for, certainly their emotions seemed genuine. He seemed to me like a genuine guy. I mean, that just from a distance, that's how he came off to me. But I was going to need.
I mean, there's always going to be a smear campaign. Project Blue Book it. You can look and find any medium, any psychic that starts getting a lot of notoriety. Suddenly, there's a smear campaign. Sylvia Brown had one. Edgar Casey had one. John Edwards had one. Vincent von Prague has gone through the same thing. So it always makes me question, what is the truth with that?
Yeah, that's an question. Because when I started to look into it for myself, it became clear to me very quickly that there is a lot of evidence that mediumship is a genuine phenomenon. Before we went on air, you and I talked a little bit about the research done in the end of the 1800s, early 1900s by the Society for Psychical Research, for instance, and then the American Society for Psychical. Some of the brightest scientists of their day came to the conclusion that, without a doubt, this is a real phenomenon. And we kind of have just brushed all of that under the rug. All of that evidence, most people are not aware of. And certainly my science teachers were not aware of all of this stuff. I was definitely not taught in biology. Oh, and by the way, one of the abilities of the brain occasionally seems to be communication with people who are no longer in a body. That was definitely not being taught to us in college.
Right, and probably one of the more well-known studyists of it was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of Sherlock Holmes. And, you talk about testing mediums and that type of thing and getting them to go for it. And I really have this question for you. So did you take and tie them at every bendable joint and suck alcohol from their mouth to do this? How did you test this out with your skeptic mind?
I was testing mental mediums, so these are people who are like John Edward, right? So the only real evidence we can get is statistical evidence in this case, how accurate they are information that they're giving. And the accuracy rates were way above what could be considered to be chance, just way above. And not only that, some of the types of specific information that occasionally comes through really puts it beyond the shadow of a doubt that that there's a genuine phenomenon going on. You could have a medium who only has an accuracy rate of, say, 40%, right? Which is not that high, because 30% of information is going to apply to most people. But she could say something during that reading that let you know something real is happening. You know, even the statistics are not clear cut, you know.
And this is what I find with statistics. Like, everyone always says, well, how accurate are you? I run about 87%. I fail at timing a good bit because humans got slow for some reason. But, you know, with mediums, a lot of them are interpreting what they see, trying to figure out what the other side is talking about. And for me, it's a 3-part system. You know, it's the crossover loved one, the loved one, with my spirit guide in the middle, passing the information along.
Yeah.
It's like playing telephone. And this is what we've had a hard time getting skeptics to understand, or skeptics to get that, yeah, we may see a body laying in the middle of a field, not moving, so it's dead because it's not moving. No, it's alive. It's just in a basement. Or a storm cellar, or that type of thing.
Yeah.
What have been some of your experiences? Because as you've gone through and done the testing.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. The medium that I've worked with most, her name is Angelina Diana, and she, you know, we interview her at length about what the process is like for her, and that's exactly what she says. You know, this is not a science. This is an art. It's the art of interpretation. She's getting shown these images. You know, she's clairvoyant, clairaudient, so she hears things, she sees images, she tastes stuff and feels things, so I'm well aware that it's an interpretation, and you're completely right that when you're dealing with, first of all, also there's a difference in my mind between a skeptic who's an open-minded skeptic and a debunker. And the debunkers are the people who drive me nuts, because these are people who they have a wall up, and it doesn't matter how great the data is, it's just not going to get in, right? Because they've already decided that this is impossible. I literally had a scientist say to me, what you're telling me can't have happened because it can't have happened, which of course that's a nonsensical statement. And that's not what, you know, science is supposed to be. We observe something happen out in the world, and then we figure out what it is that's happening. But before you can get to the figuring out part, you have to accept that you're observing it, right? And
that's why they have the observer effect.
Yes, right.
You know, and what I get into a lot when I have to deal with debunkers is, for me, it's like trying to read through a concrete wall of newspaper.
Yeah.
You know, you could tell them the shoe size, the pant size, what they looked like, what they wore, what they ate, everything they've done. But if you don't remember to say rosemary, you're wrong.
That's right. You know, and complicating matters further, and I understand that skeptics will take this as a red flag, but in physical mediumship especially, I've been told that, you know, a negative attitude towards this stuff can affect the results. And this very well could be why replicability is so difficult in this field, because you have open-minded researchers like a guy named Hal Puthoff, right? Who's one of the top scientists in the world. He's got top secret security clearance, and he, under his studies at the Stanford Research Institute with Uri Geller and you know, the remote viewers back in the 70s, the results were clear. That psychic ability is a real thing. The results were completely clear. There's like no two ways about it. Unequivocally, Uri Geller was doing something genuine in that lab.
Right.
But when other experimenters or other scientists who are not open to this idea maybe try to replicate it in their labs, we have trouble getting it replicated. So it very well could be that it makes sense. Like you said, the observer effect, right? We know that consciousness, our consciousness, seems to affect the physical world. That's what the double slit experiment shows us with the observer effect. So if that's true, that our own consciousness, our own expectations can affect results, then a severely negative attitude might preclude that person's ability to perceive these things.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of mediums and a lot of psychics do things to open that perspective or to change that perspective, i.e., praying before a session with their client, getting them into that receiver mode. Now, my question is how much have Project Blue Book paid attention to this? Because for those that know what Project Blue Book is, it was where the government attempted to and use psychics for intel, but also attempted to use them to get information. That it would include mediumship things of, all right, I need you to go call up this agent that died. We need to know where his paper is, type stuff. Did you get into that? Have you ran into that with either one of them?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, if I remember correctly, J. Allen Hynek, right, who was the scientific advisor in Project Blue Book, there was the public facade that was Project Blue Book, and then there was J. Allen Hynek's actual research, and his son, Paul Hynek, is very active now.
Right.
And Project Blue Book was a farce, right? It was meant as a way their intention was to debunk the sightings. That was the government's intention. J. Allen Hynek was a genuine scientist who had genuine curiosities, and he saw very quickly that there was something to all of this in many of the cases, right? So what he said publicly, his son talks about this a lot now, what he said publicly does not match up with what he found and what he ended up believing in his life. So you have guys like J. Allen Hynek using remote viewers to try to see like what's happening on a UFO, for instance, or what's going on maybe on the dark side of the moon. Stuff like that was done at SRI, but
that was done there. I think it was prisoner of war projects. They were like trying to locate someone that had gotten took over. That was done there, but they weren't even doing the mediumship of trying to get back into records and stuff and reading secret documents and stuff.
Oh, definitely, they did that.
The stuff that they done was just ridiculous. Which, at the same time, I technically believe there's 3 Project Blue Books. There's the public record one, which is crap. There's the one that comes from Heimlich, which is watered down. And then there's the one that was with the 3 scientists, including Heimlich and 2 others that are unnamed. And it has a lot more information of what not only the U.S. done, but UK done, and what SSR done. All together. And it's just like, can we just get it done?
Yeah. The whole UFO thing, that's long been an interest of mine as well. Leslie Kane, who is the woman who wrote the book Surviving Death, and then that's what the series is based on. She's become a good friend of mine, and she's the one who broke the story in the New York Times in 2017 about the Pentagon's program, where the Pentagon finally admitted, they released those 3 videos admitting that we do not know what these things are. And of course, that's just the very tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
So it's a complicated question what all of this is about, why the secrecy is the way that it is. For some reason, obviously, they think it's a good idea to keep this secret. What interests me most about it is, there's a guy named Jacques Vallée, right, who is a fantastic scientist, and he's been looking into the UFO phenomenon seriously for years. He was a member of what he called the Invisible College, along with J. Allen Hynek and some other great scientists. They were invisible because no one took this stuff seriously. So they were like basically meeting in like basements. You know what I mean? These are some of the smartest minds on the planet. And they're coming together and they see that there really is something to this, and they're trying to figure it out. And Vallée concluded, as did Hynek and others, that it seems like consciousness is a part of this whole deal, this UFO thing, because you'll have cases where you'll have multiple witnesses and they're not all seeing the same thing, for instance. They're seeing something supernatural, but they're not seeing the same supernatural thing. So it's a very complicated question why the government does what they do with regard to this topic. It's a fascinating question, but I sure wish we could get some answers made more public.
I think maybe 20 years from now when they finally have to release it, because there's a certain timeline on documents. This is what what was it, last year we finally got JFK's investigation. We're highly redacted, but we got it back. So what's your dad have to say from the other side?
Well, his main message to me was that, knowing how my brain works, I needed a ton of evidence before before my brain would let me have this. As much as I wanted it, I really needed like hard evidence to be able to be at ease and really truly know that my dad was still with me. And he has proven it time and again. That's what the book is about, all of the extraordinary evidence. And the book ends with an event that happened in my life that made it concrete, that I know objectively this stuff is real. And so that was his main message to me, that he is still here. He's still with us. Love survives, and that death is not the end. So now I think of my dad. I haven't lost him. My relationship with him has just transitioned into something else.
And I agree with that. My dad's right here. Well, his corporeal remains are right
Gotcha.
there. But, I can tell when he's unhappy. Lighters start going missing in the house. I think Joe has decided to take Dad for field trips.
Hey, at this point. No, because there have been some things, too, that I can't just dismiss. So I've decided he is another member of the household, and this happens. But now I do want to go backwards just a touch. So when you go looking for a medium that you're wanting to test, how did that go? Like that actual process, like how many slammed phones, how many screw you. How bad was that? I'm just curious.
I expected that this was never going to work. I called this woman. She had done a reading for us, a reading that was life-changing. It was amazing. And I couldn't let it go. So a year later, I called her. I was like, I just to be honest with you, I'm telling a lot of people now about what you did and how it makes me think my dad really is still here. And because I'm sharing the story with people now, I want to make sure that I'm telling the truth. I need to know that you are truly doing what you said you were doing. And I would like to test you on camera by bringing complete strangers to you to do readings for. And to my complete and utter shock, we were meeting for coffee at a coffee shop when we had this conversation. She said yes right away. And not only did she say yes, she signed a release form right away, giving me the rights to the footage, which is a huge chance because a filmmaker, obviously, it's all about the editing. An editor can make anyone look incredible or terrible, depending on what the editor wants to do. So she had innate trust, and she'll say now that the reason she said yes right away and signed the release right away is because she could psychically tell that my intentions were good, that I truly was out for the truth, and that I did have an open mind. So surprisingly, it went really well. And then other mediums started to be interested as well. When I began this thing, I thought it was going to be getting the mediums to participate that was going to be the hard part. It's turned out it was getting scientists to participate that was the hard part.
We're used to, I'm going to speak for the psychic side of the mediumship world. We're used to being tested every day, 20 times a day, however it is. So us getting on camera, getting filmed, doing this isn't a big deal most of the time for us. It's kind of like, yeah, okay. Make sure that the camera at least has good lighting and decent sound. And I need to be done by 6:30. So if we can wrap that up, great.
Well, but I also know that with Aeson, that sometimes getting that client that just wants to sit there and play stump the psychic, let's stump the psychic, let's stump the psychic. Even you will personally just get to the point of stop playing stump the psychic.
And I'll tell
what you want to know.
You're wasting money. I get paid nicely, but I don't want to take money from you for bullshit. What do you want to know? And then I have fun. When I've done live events, I do a white party. Done it for a couple years. We didn't do it the years of COVID. But there's a gentleman there, and he owns a company, and he sits down, and he's half tanked. And doesn't believe crap.
And I know which guy it is immediately.
Boom, 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 boom. You know, and I'm just hitting him left, right, and center the first year. He goes, okay. Because at the time, I think he was running a construction business. His wife was doing another. And I'm like, all this shit's going to change. You're going to get out of what you're doing. You're doing something different. Boom, boom, boom. He shows up next year, and I'm thinking, oh, God. My God, he goes, oh, Lord, he's back. Yes, he's back, David. I just want to thank you. We bought a staffing agency. We've made millions. I'm like, can I get a little royalty check?
Yeah, for real.
Hey, he did tip nice.
He always tips nice after that. His wife tipped nice before because she just thought he was an ass. I love reading for her, though. What has been, before the show, we were talking about an experience of you seeing your dad's hand in physical mediumship.
Yeah. So physical mediumship is something that I knew almost nothing about before reading Leslie's book, actually, Surviving Death. That's where I first read about it. And for the average person, this is not something we're familiar with anymore. You know, it was at the beginning of the 1900s, it was all the craze. Everyone was sitting in seances and tipping tables and having these things, physical manifestations happen in their homes. And then it was summarily debunked by scientists and by Harry Houdini, who very unfairly treated. Now, granted, he did catch people who were faking stuff. Certainly, that has been part of the story, and what has made it complicated is there have been people who have cheated and faked physical mediumship, and Houdini did find a lot of those people. But there were also people that he ended up debunking that were doing something genuine. And he put on a stage show where he would debunk the parts he could explain and completely ignore the stuff he could not explain. He would just completely leave it out. So I, through Leslie, there's a medium named Stuart Alexander, who is this fantastic guy. And he lives in England. And through her, less than a year after stumbling across her book at a Barnes & Noble, I just stumbled across it. Less than a year after that, I was sitting in a room with Leslie and this guy, Stuart, for a seance, my first physical seance with Stuart.
Your first physical English seance.
Yes.
We need to clarify. There's English seances, there's US versions of them that are okay, and then there's show seances.
Yes. Yeah. This was the real deal in this little town, in this little nondescript room in a cute little house. And it was shocking to me. I made a little video, like looking in that little room and knowing that in that little tiny nondescript room once a week on Monday nights, the veil between the two worlds, or whatever it is that keeps us separate, thins, and the spirit worlds, or whatever that place is able to step through, and step through in such a phenomenal way that there's no two ways about it. So this is where we're not talking anymore about interpretation. We don't have a medium who's trying to interpret the visions she's getting. We're having physical manifestations that everyone there in the room can see and hear and feel and be a part of. So it's like, it's unequivocal. This stuff is happening. And I saw ectoplasm, which is a word that I was sure was invented by Harold Ramis in Ghostbusters. That's where I knew the word ectoplasm from. But as it turns out, it's a real substance that some mediums, when they go into a deep trance, the spirit world in some way is able to extract this substance either from their eyes, nose, mouth, sometimes from Stuart. A lot of times it comes from his solar plexus area, it seems like, and use that to physically manifest in the room. And in the most advanced forms of this mediumship, as crazy as this is going to sound to some people, you can have fully formed, materialized beings physically walking around the room and touching you with their physical hands. So I had that experience. Totally changed my life.
Right. And England has some beautiful training. They have a lot of craftsmanship there. They also have some of the best regulations for psychics and mediums, bar none, the world. they actually repealed the Witchcraft Act to enact the Mediumship Act because they had a medium that done a seance, was bringing sailors through that people thought were living because they hadn't reported that the ship had sank. And she had to go to jail somehow, and they couldn't find her with witchcraft because it's all done in a Christian setting. So what do? They passed a witchcraft law to put her in jail. They used the witchcraft law to put her in jail, but the judge made them replace it with the Mediumship Act.
Yeah, this is Helen Duncan, I think, that you're talking
Correct.
about. And she did some extraordinary things. She did some things that are truly extraordinary. So yeah, that's another case where these things have just been swept under the rug. And now most people, when they hear the name Helen Duncan, what they think of is what you're saying. They think of the part where she was quote unquote caught cheating. And they totally don't take the time to investigate the actual story.
Right. That the Queen Mary had actually been bombed, that they had lost soldiers, and she was sitting there just laying it out like the boys had come home. And this, however, got to authorities. This is why a lot of mediums will not read on current active events, especially like Desert Storm. Most mediums said, if your loved one's from Desert Storm, I can't read on it. If you're, this. And it's because it's not that they can't. It's that if they do, then they run the risk of, FBI showing up and not wanting a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So for our audience that's not experienced ectoplasm, because again, this is a highly, I think there's 40 in this country now that's able to still do this?
As far as I know, there are only about 7 people in the world right now who produce it at the level that Stuart does. Where, it's there might be more, but they're not public, Right. And Stuart himself, he keeps very much. He's a very private guy, and that's another thing. Stuart doesn't make any money from physical mediumship. He has he's a very successful businessman. He kept this whole part of his life completely secret, even from his own kids, for a long time, because he was afraid about the word getting out and what that would do to his life. So there might be more. I'm sure there are, but they keep it. They might be keeping it under wraps.
Right, and may not be public, or they may still be in what's called their training phases, because I know Camp Chesterfield has a training phase, ARE has a training phase, and I think there's a camp in Florida that's also spiritual mediumship that's a very much training phase.
Oh, and for Stuart, for instance, physical mediumship can take years to develop because apparently the spirit worlds, according to them, need time to work with the individual's physical medium's body. Basically, the ectoplasm is different, I guess, in everyone, and they need time to work with it in order to develop to the point that they can make these manifestations happen in a physical way. So Stuart sat for years where nothing at all happened. It takes incredible dedication. They would get together every Saturday night. It was just him and his wife and a couple of friends, and it became like their party night. They would get together, sit in a dark room for an hour, nothing would happen, and then they would have their tea and biscuits, and it was fine. But it takes that level of dedication. And then
practice.
Yes, a lot of work, and a lot of us now don't have that sort of patience,
or dedication.
Yeah,
I mean, people think it's weird when I say I work 70 hours a week, but I work 70 hours a week because it takes that marathon running training to keep moving with stuff. Have you experienced cabineting yet?
What's that? Sorry,
cabineting or cabinet reading?
Oh no, I don't think I have. What is that?
Okay, that's where they put the medium in the cabinet.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, cabinet. I have. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's totally blacked out, so they don't know. They don't see facial features. They don't see light. I understand that that's easier for some mediums to read in because it's total darkness. So it's sensory deprivation.
Yeah, and so this is a red flag to skeptics, right? And it was to me at the beginning as well, because it sounds, of course you have to sit in pitch black darkness to make these things happen. But apparently, according to the spirit world that at least speak through Stewart and other physical mediums, ectoplasm is very sensitive to light. It's just a very sensitive substance. So when full spectrum visible light is shown, it deteriorates quickly, very quickly. And in fact, it can happen so quickly that it can injure the medium. And that happened with Helen Duncan. Someone basically turned on a flashlight or something like that to try to catch her in the act. And the ectoplasm retreats very quickly back into the body. She got injured. She got taken to the hospital, and she died not long after that. And a few mediums have died as a result of injuries sustained from what they say, ectoplasm snapping back into the body. So Stewart has been working so long and he's so developed that he can do this in red light. They use red light because it's the lowest energy visible wavelength, so you can still see it. You can still see everything that's going on, but it's a less intense energy wavelength.
That's how you've been able to capture it on camera.
That's how you capture it on camera. That's how you can see it. And it has been captured on camera a ton. People use infrared cameras, but people assume these pictures are fake, as I did, because it looks crazy, right? We have to admit this. It looks like people with cotton coming out of their mouths. That's what it looks like. And when I first saw the pictures, like I was in a club called the Phenomenology Club in high school, where we looked at, the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and UFOs and all that stuff. And my teacher brought in a book, and it was physical mediums. I didn't know that was the term at that time. And I was like, well, that's obviously fake. How did that dude keep all that cotton in his mouth? But there are genuine pictures. So in my book, I have a picture of a fully materialized woman. And that is a spirit person made out of ectoplasm, as crazy as that is to believe. And you look at her and you're like, that's just a lady standing there in silk drapes. It's not. It's not. That is a fully materialized spirit person standing in the room that had not been there a minute before.
Right. When you've worked with your mediums, have you noticed similarities with them?
In terms of what?
Behaviors, appetites, pre-working behavior.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's a study being done about that now at the Windbridge Research Center by a woman named Dr. Julie Beisel, who's a fantastic scientist. She did a great study, one of the best studies out there, a quintuple blind study on mediumship. And she came to the conclusion that this is definitely a genuine phenomenon. So now that she is finally past that part of it, she's now looking at questions like you just asked. Are there similarities about the physiology of mediums, for instance? Do they get sick more often than non-mediums? Because for some people, mediumship seems to be taxing on the body for some reason. Yeah, so they might get sick more often in some ways. Things of that nature. So I really encourage people to go to her website, the Windbridge Research Center, and there's a ton of material there about stuff like that.
Yeah, because we've noticed that mediums and psychics, we'll just group them together for easiness tonight, normally have an autoimmune disorder.
Yes, that's one of the,
normally either smoke or drink. I know a bunch of mediums that they have to drink to shut down. They don't get drunk. Drinking is not a problem. Like, they can take their tea and whiskey all day long, but it's to shut them down because they don't get sleep. Most psychics don't sleep a lot to begin with. Most of them have skeletal problems.
Interesting.
Back disorders, leg disorders, joint disorders. The skeleton just doesn't seem to work for the energy.
Interesting. Yeah. See, those are important questions, and that's the kind of stuff we can get to if we finally get past this ridiculous wall that's been built up against anything quote unquote paranormal. Right now, if you're a mainstream scientist, you risk your career. If you if you're working at a mainstream university, if you tell them you want to do a study into mediumship, you're risking your academic career, and that's absurd. So I really wish we could get past that.
Well, what's some of the benefits you've seen out of mediumship?
The main benefit for me was certainly a a mitigation of my grief, of the grieving process. I mean, like I said, when my dad died, we were shattered. And then once I had this experience with this medium, and I really believed something was real that was happening here, that it meant my dad was still with me in some form. It like pulled me out of this pit of despair, and it really alleviated that grief immensely. And that's another study, again, that Dr. Julie Beisel is interested in doing, is looking at, she's working on this now, I believe, looking at how mediumship can be incorporated into grief therapy. Because right now, the traditional talk therapy, the idea is to accept the loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe what we're talking about here, then it's not about accepting the loss necessarily. It's about accepting that the relationship has changed. You've lost a form of the relationship, but you are maintaining a relationship in a different way if you believe what we're talking about. So, yeah, in my mind, mediumship has an amazing ability. There's a great possibility for bringing comfort to people. And it also, to have your mind opened in this way can be such a fun thing, right? It can simply be fun to find, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff out there we don't understand.
There's a lot of stuff we haven't even looked at. I mean, because we're just now breaking into quantum physics.
Yeah.
We're just now breaking into DNA structure, which we were talking about, that there's got to be a recessive gene in humanality, because psychics seem to be genetically from one generation to another, or have a end of life optional point that they stay on at.
Yeah, there definitely seems, in my personal research, it's not unusual for this to be something that is hereditary. Like if I have a medium that I work with, there's a good chance her mom or her grandmother maybe was also a medium, or at least did tarot card readings, or was somehow sensitive to this stuff. So again, more questions we should have. People that aren't bartenders, we should have some of our brightest people working on these questions, because they are fascinating. And like you said, quantum physics, where we are right now with quantum mechanics, for any scientist right now to say that anything is impossible is absurd, because we now know quantum physics is like the craziest thing of all time. It's way crazier than what happens in a physical seance room. It's crazier than my dead dad materializing in the room. The stuff that happens in the quantum world, the human brain can't even fathom what it means,
Exactly. And we're still in that two-dimensional world, living in a, I want to say, 4 to 5 dimensional experience. Tell us about your documentary. What's different from the Netflix series? What's different from what's your hook?
The Netflix series, to me, is kind of a nice introduction to people about the various lines of evidence out there, suggesting the survival of consciousness, or at least the separateness of consciousness. So it looks at NDEs, it looks at kids who have memories from previous lives, mediumship, end-of-life experiences, like people who are in hospice, for instance, that have deceased loved ones come back. So it's a kind of a nice primer. But it doesn't go very deeply into these topics. And I'm hoping that with my documentary, I'm going to focus a little more on mediumship and go a little further into the evidence, a little more than you get in Surviving Death.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's going well. I mean, I had started it a number of years ago, and then the Netflix project came around, and I had to wait, so that filmed over the course of, that's a long process.
Right.
So I then had to pause my production because I wasn't sure how much of my footage was going to be used in that.
Right.
And so now that it's out, I now see, that there is space that my documentary can fill. So once the world normalizes a bit more in terms of COVID, and we're safe to be in close quarters again, I think I'm going to pick it back up. So it's still a ways out, I think, in order to do what I want to do. But it's on my website, MikeAnthony.com. I have a few clips of some of the stuff that we've worked on, and I'll from time to time keep putting up some teasers about what we're doing.
Yeah. What do you think will happen now? Because we look at history and the mediumship gifts in general. We had World War One and swine flu. Mediumship picked up. We had the plague. Mediumship fully developed. We had the Civil War. Mediumship took a very big hump. Where do you think it's going from the outside?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for a lot of people, this past year has been transformative in a lot of ways, right? In I have always felt, and again, so this is getting away from science. This is just my own instinct here. I have felt from early on in this thing that there is some spiritual component to all of this. We've sort of been forced to slow down, and I think it's going to have a large impact in psychologically speaking, in ways that we probably don't fully yet understand. We spend so much time. The world in general has sort of cut itself off from the spiritual side of things, right? In cultures past, in Egypt, for instance, death was such a big part of life, and the afterlife was such a big part of this life. It was something that everyone thought about, and it wasn't like concealed away. Right now in our culture, death is something we try to hide away often. It happens in hospital rooms, and it's kind of we don't openly discuss it very much. So I feel like there is a shift that's going to be happening, where maybe we open ourselves up a bit more again, because we've been open to this in the past. Maybe it cycles. Maybe this all cycles. And like you said, then the Industrial Revolution came along, and science became the new god, right? And I think that ended up shutting us down in some other ways. Science is amazing, right? I don't mean to say. I love science. Science put us on Mars. Science is developing these vaccines. I mean, the human capacity to understand things, I am thrilled with. The problem in my mind comes when science becomes dogmatic, and it's people
stops being experimental and starts being dictatable.
Yes.
And we see this so often with science. We see this so often with them not wanting to say they're wrong. Like, okay, we've had this theory for a while now. Yes, we wrote papers on it. Yes, you even saw PSAs about it. Yeah, that was all bullshit.
Right.
Keep our studies being paid. We had to produce that just so that we could work, so I can get my kid through college and put food on the table. Yes, I had to say that this or that was wrong or bad for you, i.e. eggs. That's my favorite aggravational tone about scientists, is they can't even figure out what to do with an egg, much less a soul.
Right. That's right.
Well, and then also the problem with research being bought by corporations just to prove their product is or isn't, or a competitor's product is or isn't. Like we see a large amount of science became about the money, not about the science.
Totally.
Especially in research, and it does create a long-lasting, massive problem for the trustworthiness of, even to the point of questioning the methodology.
Yes.
That goes into everything. So, I can certainly get behind that one. I do hope that we can see a resurgence in good science, and especially the curiosity.
Yeah, because I don't think we've seen that since the late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. Money, like it does in so many things, it has poisoned the well in a lot of ways, and it's because of money that some of our best scientists can't pursue questions they want to pursue. So things, some things at a structural level, at a systemic level, need to change.
Yeah, and you were talking about I'm sorry, the scientist's name's past me, but she's doing some studies in mediumship and now grief counseling with mediumship. Um, Tell us about that. What have you seen in these studies as they've come out? Who's paying for them?
Yeah, Dr. Julie Beisel, she's completely funded by donations, so she is not bound to any. She's an independent scientist. Before that, she was working with the University of Arizona, which luckily they have been open to some of this stuff more so than other universities. Right now, Dr. Beisel is the only study that I currently know about that's ongoing with mediumship. Sadly, like in maybe the world, she's like the only ongoing current study into mediumship. Luckily, she's a fantastic scientist, and she was going to be a pharmacologist. She was heading down a very mainstream scientific path. When after her mom died, she happened to see a medium, and like me, that experience, she couldn't let it go. And being the good scientist that she is, her curiosity got the best of her, and she decided that she had to study it no matter what anybody said. And luckily, she ended up getting hooked up with the University of Arizona, where a study was currently going on at that time with a guy named Dr. Gary Schwartz. And then there were issues that people took with that study. They ended up poking holes in the methodology, basically. Sort of what you were saying, that they fairly or not poked holes in the study. So Dr. Beisel filled those holes, and she adjusted some of the procedures they were using, and still continued to get the positive results.
Oh yeah.
So her work is great. There's also work being done by Dr. Emily Kelly, I believe her name is, at the University of Virginia. She did a study into mediumship that also resulted in positive results. So yeah, I mean, whenever someone seriously looks at this stuff, the results seem to me to be pretty clear. And then there are other things out there, like we've been talking about, where there is no question about whether or not the thing is happening or not. It's happening or it's not happening, and it's happening,
Right. It's no question. We start working on the house, and if Dad doesn't like the paint choices, or he doesn't like something going on, you guarantee every lighter in this house, even though he already has a nice collection, will come missing. If he doesn't want you to leave the house, the car keys will go missing. Both of them.
Yeah.
You do have
experiences of that with your dad? Or
Sorry?
is my dad the only prankster?
Oh, no, nothing quite like that. My dad does a lot with lights. He flashes lights a lot at me, which is interesting because that's something when my parents got divorced when we were very young, and when we would see him on the weekends, and when he dropped us off, he would flash his car lights as like a final goodbye, and we would flash the lights on the porch. So even in life, that was always sort of a thing. Right after he died, I was back in New York, and I was going back to work for the first time, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I was having a really down day. I lived in an apartment in Queens, and every single apartment on my floor had a light in the hallway outside of their door. So they're like 10 doors, 10 lights. I open up the door, and my light, and I have a video of this, my light is going crazy right above my door. Wow. So that started right away, and it still happens quite often. And in fact, I have 2 lights here, and at some point during our interview here, one of them went off, even though the battery is brand new. So perhaps that's him.
Thanks, Dad. Next time, put him on screen. Now, I know your mother was divorced from your father. Has he gone to visit her?
Yes, he has. They had a very unique relationship in that they met when they were like 12, 11, 12 years old, and then they got married right after high school. So they were lifelong companions, even though they got divorced when they were still basically kids. They were only like 25 when they got divorced. They ended up staying friends and very close for their whole life. So my mom had the very interesting experience of having my dad talk to her. He called her name one morning when she was in the bathroom, and I quizzed my mom about this experience. I wanted to know exactly what it was that happened. It was not in her head. She heard it as a physical sound, as though he was standing beside her, and he said, "Liz," like that loud, right in her ear. And among other things too, like with butterflies, I tell a bunch of those stories in the book, but there have been multiple ways that he's communicated.
Yeah. I can always tell when Dad's and the mom have gotten into it. And yes, Mom is still on this side, Dad's on the other side. I can always tell because she's highly pissed. I'm like, what do you say this time? So, Joe, why don't you jump in here? Because you're a resident atheist. You're still getting exposed to all this and getting to put up with my insanity.
Little bit. No, I'm just taking it all in. I think it throws a lot of the guests and authors that we have on. I tend to hang back a little bit. But no, I think the thing that's really kind of sticking for me the most, because I've had much of my family pass. Late in life child, it happens. But I guess I'm just a little curious. So it sounds like for the immediate family, it sounds like there's at least another sister. Has her experience been the same? Is it like almost like, I'm not saying exactly the same, but it's been a little bit for everyone, so to speak?
Yeah, everyone's had experiences. My sister has also had experience with mediums, so they have been along with me for this whole ride. With the exception, unfortunately, my family is terrified of flying. My sister especially, so I just could not get her to come on the plane to England, and that's where I'd like to take you, Joe. Someone who is skeptical but open-minded. When you see this thing happen, and it just like, again, there's no two ways about it. It happened. It completely changes everything in your life because once you know that's possible, then my God, what else is possible? So that's the only part of it that she hasn't seen with her own eyes, or that my mom hasn't seen with her own eyes, is getting to see, human hands form out of nothing, out of smoke.
He has a passport.
I do.
And your agent has his email, so maybe we can work that out.
Yeah, if he, Stuart, he doesn't do many anymore. He's an older gentleman at this point, still very much vibrantly alive, but he doesn't do very many public sittings anymore. But if he does start doing them again, I'll send you an email. I mean, it really.
I know. I don't know Stuart. I know of Stuart. He's kind of like the English phantom medium, or when you're compared to him.
Right.
Kind of like any medium right now in the United States is compared to the Long Island medium. Like, well, she does the feather and the sage. Do you do the feather and the sage? No, I'm not cleansing you.
Yeah. So, the family has had the. So have you had any experiences, Joe, with after losing someone that you couldn't explain?
Not really. Some dreams after mom died, I can definitely relate though on the casket experience. Like it's gotten to the point, like the funeral director and I joke with each other. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've gotten past the, oh my God, I'm here for a funeral, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, same as last time. Like what you got at like 6 o'clock on a Friday, like we're just, look, again, because so much of my family has passed.
Yeah.
Well, I do have something, and it's not spirit related in a way. The secretary.
Oh,
the only piece of furniture I told you do not bring to my house.
God. Well, actually, no, there were two. Remember, there were two pieces of furniture. Well, one you said absolutely not, and the other one you said, we'll have to do a lot of work to that if we take that home. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but all right. But no, now the secretary was a fun piece of furniture in our family. It was for a cousin of mine, it was a Christmas gift that basically his parents wanted that he didn't. He thought he was getting a train set. This was my grandmother and her sister and their 2 kids. Dad was getting a train set. Conrad knew he was getting a train set. So he thought because every year they got the same thing for Christmas, he was getting a train set. He didn't. He got a secretary, this big, giant, massive piece of furniture. It's a fold-down desk and a little bookcase and secretary. Is what he got. Absolutely hated it. Refused to take it with him when he left home. He got left with my great aunt, his mother. When she passed, it went to my grandmother, who spent the rest of her life going, will someone please take this stupid piece of furniture? Will someone, anyone, I don't care at this point, please take this stupid piece of furniture. So she passes, and there's this debate about who, of course, like there is. And it's like, I don't want it. I want nothing to do with it. I hate that piece of furniture. And he had the same reaction to it, was, I don't want it. Before I could even say anything, nope, don't want it. Whatever we're taking with us, that's fine, but you leave that there. And I'm like, not a problem.
Well, no, it had left before I had got there.
My brother actually ended up being the one to take it, which is slightly weird and ironic. Or ironic might not be the right word, because it was literally with him for like 2 years and then he passed.
Right.
So
the part of the story you're leaving out is you continue to everybody, secretary gone, not in the house. Everyone's still walking around the secretary.
Everyone's still walking around every place in the living room it's been. Because it was an ungodly piece of furniture for the space. It was a beautiful piece, but huge. They're huge. And there's this one spot in the hallway that it kind of got dumped for a couple of decades. And that was the biggest thing, is everyone just kept walking around it. Because I think all of us have at least one broken toe from that stupid piece of furniture. Because it was gargantuan.
Yeah.
But yeah, everywhere that it had ever sat, everyone just walked around it.
But that's been his strongest, what I would classify, paranormal spiritual experience, other than Dad stealing his car keys and him blaming me. And I was like, I ain't seen him, ain't gone out of the house in a week. Where'd you put him?
I didn't put him anywhere. You stole him. I know you did.
Have you seen a medium, Joe?
I have not. I mean, other than obviously, but no, not for a reading. He will not read me. He's like, no, that's not a good thing for a relationship. Doesn't work that way. Too close.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys are together.
Yeah.
Oh God, living with a psychic, being in a relationship with a psychic, that's something I can't. How do you get through that, Joe? He can read your mind.
That's a conversation we've had. And one, he says it doesn't quite work that way. And I choose to believe that. But two, there are times I'm sitting here going, you've either bugged the house or stop listening. Just stop there. There have been conversations I've had. There's no one else in this house while I'm on the phone or however I'm communicating. There's no way he could know this. There is no recording of it that I know of.
Yeah.
There was nothing with an open mic. And then he turns around and like 2 days later says something that it's like, how? Really? Continue that thought.
Uh-huh.
Like, really, just go ahead. Continue the thought. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he's learned to, when I say the tires need to be replaced, I may be 6 months early. It'll need to be replaced.
Yeah. That was the fun timing one we had very early on. He kept, every time when we were first dating, he would be on the road because we live like, what, 45, 50 minutes apart at that point?
50 odd minutes apart, depending on what mood I was in.
Yeah, so he would be on this exact same point of road, and I kept trying to tell him for the longest time, it's just weird pavement there. Like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just you do this every time. Literally every trip. He was like, I have to pull over. I think I have a flat tire. I have to pull over. I think I have a flat tire. For what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
Every single trip. Okay, this got to the point it was almost comical. And then we were driving back from an event, if I remember correctly.
No, we were driving back from a game night, and then that's back when we were doing the game nights.
Yeah, so yeah, we're driving back, and sure enough, the night that the tire went out on the car,
you were with him.
I was with him, and we were in that spot of the road.
Wow. Wow.
Exactly right there. Weirdest night of our... One, we turn around and, of course, immediately call for roadside assistance. Going, well, thank goodness we have roadside assistance because we had just conjoined our insurance policies.
And that's one of my stipulations. If we cut, I don't care, take off the medical, whatever, I want roadside assistance.
Yeah. So we dialed roadside assistance, hung up. They said, oh, it'll be like 25, 30 minutes. Okay. 3 minutes later, there's a guy coming up going, you have a flat tire? We're like, God, that was quick. Like, geez, that was quick. Guy's halfway through changing the tire, and I'm like, there's no way they got someone here that fast. So we start to ask, and he's like, no, I'm with Courtesy Patrol. Because West Virginia, that's a thing. We have Courtesy Patrol trucks. They're on like 2-hour rotations. To have someone to literally blow out a tire, and then 2 minutes later...
Yeah, wow.
We're just sitting there like, okay. Like, that was... All right, let's get back on the road. Like, no.
That's a good psychic power to have. That's a helpful psychic power to be able to summon tire assistance.
I know, but it made the trip for him down take 15 minutes longer every single time for a year and a half. And I'm just like, come on, man. Like, every time you're going to stop every time.
Another experience, I also teach. And I was debating where I wanted to start this class in a location that was technically at the time 4 hours away from me, 5 hours when we had the second house. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do this. So, of course, we live in West Virginia. We see deer on the road fairly often. So after an event, I'm toast. So I'm crashing in the seat. So Mr. Driver here is counting how many deer?
Well, one deer was cute. 10 deer was that's a lot of deer. 20 deer was starting to get a little scary. 30, I'm going, this is ridiculous. And I think it was like 36 or something when I finally just like smacked him and said, I don't know what your message waiting indicator is for, but you need to figure it out. And he's like, what? I'm like, 36 deer. This is what I've counted. All standing along the road.
Wow.
Eyeing me down while I'm driving back from this event. I'm done. Like, I am not getting in an accident tonight. You need to figure this out quickly.
Yeah. And then as we're getting off the interstate, because we live right next to the exit to our house, a doe just jumps right in front of him. Like, oh, you're almost home. We're going to make sure you get this message.
Well, and
Reminder.
what was the message?
That I needed to go ahead and start this class. That I was like, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should do this.
Gotcha.
It's 4 hours drive. It's a 13-week class, 13-month class.
I got you.
Do I really want to do this? Is this really where I want to head?
And did you do it?
Yeah, I done it. Just finished the class last month. Started another one this month of the same series. The original classes wanted me to build another class, and I'm like, okay, give me a month to do it.
Great.
Another pre-COVID, I run a festival every year. It's a pagan festival, free to community. It's a whole community service thing. We couldn't get an event. We could not get a park in January.
Yeah, no venue would touch him. They wouldn't call him back. Like the previous venue was shutting down, wasn't going to be able to use that. Needed to switch venues, and every place he called, oh, they'll call you back. Call him back a week later. They'll call you back.
Yeah.
And like 10, 15, 20 different places, all feelers out. Like, someone call me back. I finally looked at him and said, sometimes things just aren't meant to happen.
Yeah.
And so he finally had the like, yeah, I can't make this. Like, right. I've tried everything.
Yeah.
And he had set a date, basically, and it was, if I don't get someone back to me, because Beltane's in May.
Right. Beltane's in May.
Yeah.
I don't have everything in line by February. I can't pull it off.
Yeah. So, like, he was already starting to put it out there, like, I can't do this. This isn't going to happen. And then we turn right around, and COVID is a thing. Everything's getting canceled.
I see.
He was kind of sitting there having a moment of, do you know how much work and how angry I would have been?
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's how much money we would have spent out, because, again, we pay for everything. The community donates back in, or the community helps raise if we're short. All the venues that we use are non-refundable.
Yeah.
Because it's state parks. They're not going to refund us, state emergency or not. So I'm like, okay, got us. Thank you.
Yeah.
So other than your dad throwing lights and talking to your mother, what else have you experienced? Not only with dad, but the grandmother and the other parties that come to visit.
My favorite form of the communication are the dreams. I have these incredibly often with my dad, and like I said earlier, and a lot of them I have forgotten that he's dead. And it's, but I had my favorite dream of all time in my whole life. I was sitting with my dad at a table in this beautiful big house. And everyone in the house, I knew them. We were very close. Even though there were people I couldn't recognize, I knew somehow that I knew them very closely. And my dad and I are having this great conversation, and we're just laughing. And then at one point, it occurs to me in the dream, oh my God, you're dead. And I suddenly realized, and he just smiled. And I suddenly realized in the dream that I was visiting him in this case. He wasn't like here visiting me. I was wherever the heck he is. And everyone in this house, I suddenly realized, just mentioned my grandmother. My grandmother was here. Everyone that I'd lost in my life was at this party. And it was this incredible dream. And then at the very end, I hugged him, and I can still feel his arms around me from this hug. It was just the most concrete, physical. It was this visceral dream. it felt as real as right now. So those are my favorite communications now, are these dreams, these times when I feel like, you're obviously, when you're falling asleep, maybe we're more open to having the abilities that you have, and so those are my favorite communications.
From what I get is it's easier for the human brain to perceive the other side when it's in that twilight dawn range.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out what I want to say about this. What's your dad's job on the other side? Because we don't get out of work on the other side.
It's funny that you said that, because you are a little psychic. So in this dream, this very same dream that I'm telling you about, that is the most amazing dream in my life, after I've realized he's dead and all of this, I say to him at one point, Dad, what do you do here? What's a day like for you here? And all of a sudden, from this beautiful party we were in hospital scrubs, and he took me to this place where it was made known to me. And by this point, by the way, we're not talking with our mouths. He's communicating telepathically, I guess. And he told me his job, and this is something that has never consciously occurred to me, is to help young spirits who pass, like children, to help them transition. For some reason, he is like a helper specifically of younger people who die early, to transition. Now, what was really interesting about this, we're in this sort of hospital ward when this is going on. Suddenly in the dream, my cousin, the whole dream is beautiful, right? I'm having this beautiful feeling of love that I can't even describe throughout this whole dream. There's this one moment in the dream that is perturbing, and that's when we're in this hospital ward-ish area, and my cousin comes running out, and she can't see us. She can't see me or my dad. It's clear like she's in a different
zone.
Yeah. But I clearly see her, and she has a child with her, her son, and he's hurt in some way, and she's very worried. And so I got very worried at that moment in the dream. But then that quickly passed, and then we're back into the lovely feeling, and my dad is showing me what he's doing there. That became important because that morning I wake up from that dream, and I'm like crying because I had just hugged my dad. And then I pick up my phone like I do every morning now. That's my first thing. Pick up the phone, start scrolling through Facebook. The first thing that I see, it's my cousin with a picture of her son in a hospital bed with stitches. I forget exactly what had happened. I think he maybe just fallen down and hit his head, and he's there with stitches in the hospital. So it was clear to me that I was given that part of the dream to show me that it was something genuine, to something that connected to something that actually happened here in physical life. I saw in that same dream where all of this other stuff that I can't prove, obviously, what's going on. So, to answer your question, according to that dream, my dad is somehow involved in helping people transition.
So he's a transition specialist.
That's what it sounded like. Yeah. In particular, his specialty. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is an important thing to bring up, because I've had people come a couple days after they pass, and I'm like, they're not ready yet. I can talk to this one that's been over for about 2 years. I can't talk to them right now. They don't know how to talk to me. There's no conversion going on there. So I think it's very cool you bring up the transition specialist, and what they do. And, it's spirits that have matured enough to go over. When they get over, they adapt so well and so quickly. They're there to care for the spirits that haven't really gotten it yet. They're going from this realm to the upper vibration. So that's a vibrational change.
Yeah.
And then it's a whole different world, because there is that love and happiness spirit that's going on. I call it the other world after crack, because it's love, it's joy. Everything is beautiful. Everything is kind. It's all knowing. You've got to come out of that, but no, I can't put my hand through that wall. Yeah, you can. Poof. There you go.
Interesting. Yeah. See, that's not something I'd really thought about before having this dream. So that's and that also connects what you just said, because I've been told now by multiple mediums that my dad, he seems to be particularly good at communicating. So what happened? I like to tell people who read the book to not be disappointed if your experience with mediumship is not the same as mine. My dad, I think, has a particular knack for this form of communication. But I've had multiple mediums say to me, similar to what you just said, that my dad, like I said earlier, he was this very innately good human being, just a really amazing person. He was not a religious person, though. He did not have a lot of like religious convictions. So he didn't have, as far as I knew, very steadfast ideas about like what the afterlife might be like.
Right.
And I had multiple mediums say to me independently that my dad, when he got to the other side, it was a very easy transition for him because he didn't have these notions about what was supposed to happen or not happen. So he was kind of able to just be present and accept what was happening. And also, given his innate goodness and love, there wasn't like a whole lot of psychological stuff to work through. He left only love on the planet. He didn't have any like things he had to be worrying about. So that makes sense too, given what you just said, that he sort of was the transition for him was relatively easy, and maybe that's why he's good at helping others make that transition.
Right. And transition specialists tend to be very good at being the other side of the phone call, because they're used to working within that vibrational range of, yes, dear, you've died. We've got that. See, here's your family over here. Calm down. Yep. And then getting them adapted to life there. Kind of like rehab for us.
So transitions. So this is a thing that you've heard about. You know about this already.
Yeah. Sylvia Brown writes in the book on the other side, different roles and different things.
Okay.
Her guide explained it out as, this is what this one does. This one is what this one does. This is what this life is. Gotcha. Well, I don't agree with some of the dogma that occurred. I do agree. My guide has said, yeah, that's how it is. Everyone's got to have something to do. You get a break from your schooling, you still have to work an after-school job.
Right. Well, it's very interesting for me. It's an interesting experience for me to get this sort of corroboration from having this dream and not knowing anything about it, because I'm not familiar with Sylvia Brown's work other than seeing her on television. So it's interesting for me to hear this. Yeah.
There's animal husbandry, working in the Akashic records. There's a popular theory that, after they cross over, they go be spirit guides. No, I don't think that humans in school do not go and tutor other humans.
Right. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, I wonder, so what do you suspect your job will be many, 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 many years from now when you're on that side? Do you have a psychic notion about that?
I think I will probably go into working with people and getting their charts ready, because I see so many people making mistakes this life. Figuring out when they're going to do what they're going to do, planning their, basically going with the school notion, I'm going to be just an advisor.
Interesting. Got it.
Well, great. That means I'm going to end up afterlife tech support.
That would just mean you get to work with all the mediums and improve their connection.
Great. Psychic call waiting.
So as you're filming this documentary, have you noticed your equipment have problems?
We do have some of that. Yeah, definitely some battery drain can happen. Which I hear a lot from people. We've had a couple of odd visual disturbances in the footage, because working with digital cameras, obviously, a couple of odd things like that. not a whole lot, but I will say that the crew that I have used are all of them are highly intelligent people, definitely on the skeptical side of the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and every single one of them is now in a different place than before we began this journey. They've all seen something that has at least given them pause and made them think, yeah, that there really is something
Okay.
to it.
Now, I have a question. How good is your mediums at scheduling?
How good are they at scheduling?
Yes. Because every medium I have ever worked with is late.
Oh,
Their phone will not work. Their camera, even though it's brand new, will die in the middle of a podcast.
that's also funny that you say that. I write in the book about the first experience that we had with the medium that was coming to our house to do a reading, and she was late. And in the book, I make the joke that that night I was thinking, not a very good medium so far, not a very good psychic. Didn't you know there was going to be traffic? So yeah. Other than that, though, I've been very lucky to have, in case any of the mediums that I work with are listening, very lucky to have very punctual mediums.
Awesome. Okay, so if a medium wants to work with you, how do they get a hold of you, and where can our listeners get both your books at?
The books are on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. My website is MikeAnthony.com, and people can contact me through the website. It's info@MikeAnthony.com. So yeah, and I love hearing from. I've heard so many wonderful stories, especially since the Netflix show has aired. People share their personal stories with me about the things that have happened in their own lives, and I love hearing those things. And even if I haven't been able to get back to people, I do read all of those messages. So that's the way for if any medium would like to contact me, you can just email.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. When your third book comes out, be sure to come back.
I will. I've had a great time, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye, darlings.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Do have to bring this one up. It was the last viewer comment, which Polar Knights makes the comment, "Sweet Jesus, it is like the perfect evolution of beards. Finally, an OCD-friendly podcast."
We try.
Well, and I got to looking, and that's an absolute true statement. I'm doing what looks like to you guys, because I am kind of gingerish. It looks like just a little bit of stubble. You've got like the partial, and then he had the full.
Yeah.
It was like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. And hello, Polish Knight. Thanks for joining us on Twitch. Ashley, darling, yes, metaphysicals are fun. We haven't even gotten to dig into those. Look for articles in our Under the Tables and Dreaming. I'm thinking about starting to write about metaphysics and how they affect you, even on the everyday.
Well, the ectoplasm thing, that's kind of a nifty one too.
Yeah.
Like that's like I would be really interested in the photography like he was talking about.
Yeah. And I think it would be interesting I would love to start seeing more people I'm going to probably order you something so that you can shoot red film he was talking about.
Apparently just red light bulb. Either that or infrared photography, which is it. Well, for the red light bulb, it's just literally a red light bulb. It's the same thing you use if you're doing old school chemical development at home. Photographs.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was a lens or something, because the red light bulb thing is actually something used in the Shockey experiment.
Okay, and because when you're looking at the visible spectrum of light, right there, just past red, is infrared. It is the invisible light that is so close to the visible spectrum that actually most cameras can pick it up. It's like you remember back in the early days of like home video cameras, when they first introduced the remotes. Those were always infrared.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone used one, you would sit there and watch the light flicker from the end of the remote, even though you could look at the remote and not see it.
Uh-huh. Well,
Yeah.
cool. But no, I want to play along. I want to play with that a little bit. Of course, I've been thinking about redoing the Shocky experiment. That should be interesting. I just
So
don't know
now, what is that one again? I'm sorry, I'm a little lost.
Okay, the Shocky experiment is where you take and slice a ping pong ball in half. You fill those with cotton. Those are taped across the eyes. You put a red bulb in front of your face. And then you have headphones on that are white noise. And then with that, you have predetermined questions. So after the psychic or slash medium is ready, they hear is the question, and then begin reading the information. The last time I done it is when during training, and that was probably one of the most vivid and intense readings I've ever done.
Okay.
Yeah. I've thought of repeating it now that I have so much underneath my belt, because I've done that like when I was 25. Yeah, it's one of those college experiences, and it's like, let's redo this.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But no, very great guest, very, very awesome author.
Very awesome author. Get his book. You have it in there, or no, it's over here on my reading stack. It's a really good book. And it's on Amazon. It's not that expensive. It's not that heavy of a read. He writes in great English. I didn't have to nitpick or go, well, you could have said that differently. It's actually really good. I'm very happy with his writing and his work. Alrighty, so we do have a couple hot topics. Do you want to take on the Cricket takes on their users debate first, or do you want to take on deep fakes?
Oh, let me take on Cricket and we'll work our way up to the deep fakes. Because that's so spiraled out of control. That's a good ender. But no, Cricket. So of course, as you guys know, and especially our baristas know, you got Cricket made gifts for Christmas. That we sent you guys. And so I have a Cricket. I love my Cricket. It's actually in its little home bag over here behind me. So from the beginning, I went ahead and paid for the subscription service for the design software. And that was because I was quickly realizing that everything you needed to do in it, if you wanted to use Design Space, to create with, you really, like, you were either going to pay by the image or by the font that you wanted to use, and it could get expensive quickly. So I was like, $10 a month, okay, fine, whatever, just take my money. To get unlimited access. Now, with the Design Space and with Cricket, what I didn't know then originally is that I could very much create my own stuff using Illustrator, using Photoshop, pulling stuff online, and uploading to it. So a lot of people do this and use theirs in a professional commercial capacity. The problem with the Design Studio is that it does require everything you upload into the program to go to effectively Cricket, their cloud server, and then back down. So everything has to be processed through Cricket at a corporate outside of your house level in order to use the machine. You don't actually have direct print access like you would have with a printer. You're using this in a way remotely, even though it's on the desk next to you. So all of it was well, great, good, and fine. Now Cricket has released a new update to the machines, as well as changed a policy. And all this started over a problem with a process called cut and print, or print and cut, excuse me. Which is where you could design something in Studio, or in the Design Space Studio, the software, print it to your home printer so that you get an image, and then create a cut file and run it through the Cricut to cut out the image that you've printed. They screwed up and basically were wasting a lot of paper because of a small snag in settings. There's a new update for the machines, but with that comes this new requirement and these new limitations, which basically amount to you're allowed 20 uploads a month, and then you have to pay for the monthly subscription. Otherwise, the machine won't work again until next month.
Mm-hmm.
At least the machine will work, but you cannot do anything different with it than what you've already done.
Right.
So, yeah, a lot of angry people right now with Cricut.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, and understandably, you're basically at this point being told you have to rent the right to use hardware that you own.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, after those 20 uploads, you can't do anything with it.
All right. So here's my question. Do you think that this is going to take on to other machines, i.e. our cell phones? Because you already rent an iPhone.
Well, honestly, in many ways, you do kind of end up renting most things, like depending on how you want to look at it. Like, for instance, you can argue that a cell phone is perfectly usable without service.
Mm-hmm.
Except you can't really place and receive calls unless you have Google Voice set up.
Right.
So even if you don't need even if you never leave the house, you never use your mobile data, even if you're on a network that will predominantly route your calls through Wi-Fi, as many networks have now done with HD Voice, that's what that feature is. It'll use your Wi-Fi and it'll use cellular data to create a higher quality call and take some of the work off of the actual cell phone network, the voice side of the network. Even though you're sitting at home having this high quality call, you're not touching the provider's network. If you don't pay for that month of service, you don't have a cell phone number, no one can call you.
Right.
That's kind of the argument there. I argue most of the time that even if you own your home, you're still renting it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, kind of keep putting money aside, or have money already set aside for all of its future problems, you'll very soon not have a house.
Right.
So, as for whether this will expand into other things, I don't know. That's the part I struggle with, is to exactly how other companies could adopt the same model. We know that all subscription services, they want to offer you a certain amount of it that it's free, especially with something like Cricut, where you're buying a piece of hardware. And then a premium experience that you will want to pay for.
Right.
Where Cricut has crossed the line is moving from want to pay for into you have to pay for. It's unless you're doing very little with this machine, you're kind of going to get forced to buy.
Right.
Even though you're not really even going to get anything out of that other than the right to use your hardware.
Right.
Now, additional catch-on or additional hook with this, when they made this change, it also includes you now have to set up an online account for the machine.
Right.
So this becomes an issue with, for instance, secondhand sale. You own the machine. It's your machine. You have the account. You turn off the account because you're selling the machine. That next owner has to register. They have to be able to get online. They have to be able to set up an account and in turn set up that machine.
Well, we already saw that with Microsoft.
Okay.
With Windows 10. You have to have access to the internet to activate and work on Windows 10.
Well, there's a limit there. Microsoft has gone a little back and forth. There was a brief point in one of the feature updates that installing was an absolute nightmare. And it literally made you feel like your only choice is you have got to have an online account somewhere. You have to have an internet connection. You have to have a Microsoft account in order to set this computer up. Since then, it's hidden. It's harder to get to. It got a little easier in the next update, but that specific one made it almost impossible to find, okay, how do I set this up without an internet connection and without putting my account on it?
Right. And we've seen that also with Android. You have to have a Google account to operate or sign into an Android phone. And if it is not the same Google account that it was originally set up on the phone, even though it's factory resetted, you have to have the original account to activate it.
Well, actually, technically, it's any account that was ever logged in on the phone before you factory reset it.
Right.
It will let you use any account that was logged in. Not just the original one, but any account that was logged in after that, up to the point that you factory data reset it.
Right.
What that's about, though, is that's almost... I don't know that I hate it. I've tried really hard to hate it. I don't hate it per se. What it is about is the ability that people have had to steal phones, especially high dollar, high value phones, like my Samsung Galaxy Note 10. I have to be careful where I lay this down or it could walk away. But because flagship phones were becoming so frequently stolen, this is a requirement intended to stop the resale of stolen phones.
Right. Or it can even, stop the sale of phones. So Cricket's kind of following suit with one part of this. The other part of it's what I'm questioning. And, I wouldn't mind paying $10 to Google if it meant that I got the updates smoother, or we already pay for Amazon Prime to use our Fire Sticks and our Shees.
Yeah. And to some degree, yes, we do. Now, will those things work without those accounts, without Prime? Yes, they will. Your experience is going to be a little wonky, however.
Right.
They really, the whole service is built as kind of a bookend to having a Prime membership. This is kind of, you've gone down the Amazon road.
Right.
And we are seeing more and more of that. And it does raise the question, because what happens if your account's terminated? Right. What happens if you are, for whatever reason, banned by Amazon?
Right.
What happens to your iPhone if you're banned by Apple? What happens to Google if your Google account gets banned? And it could potentially become a major issue.
Right.
Because ultimately you could cease to exist.
Right.
As in terms of your profile and your ability to use these devices.
Right.
So that's kind of the problem, and I've gone through this in a different way. I years ago, or a few years ago now, bought a lovely device called an OnLive, OnLive. It was a unit. It connected to servers. It allowed me to play specifically Second Life, but a lot of other games. It was kind of built. It was basically a remote platform for gaming.
Nice.
Basically, it was the stupid little box that all it needed was an internet connection to connect to very specific servers, and I paid a subscription fee each month to access those servers.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, it ran a virtual computer that would allow me to play different games. This was all great. Sony bought them out
Mm-hmm.
and immediately shut down the service. So I'm sitting here holding a box from OnLive and a controller and, dead. Absolutely useless. Dead hardware. Will not work with anything else. There's no secondary service that popped up to fill that void. There was no cute little hack guide for how to continue using this hardware. I bought it, and literally 6 months later, it was a paperweight. And that is sometimes the challenge that we go through with technology.
Right. So here's the question: who's going to buy Cricket? What's going to happen to the service? Is Adobe going to buy Cricket?
Well, that does become the question: is what eventually happens, and what does that manufacturer choose to do?
Mm-hmm.
And this is in a hypothetical if Cricket shuts down now.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that were their next step, or a couple of years down the road, that's their next step. And it is a concern,
Right.
because they're moving quickly into that territory of if the company shuts down, if those servers shut down, that whole device over there is a paperweight.
Right.
Unless something else comes along to upgrade it, change it, there's an add-on, something that lets it continue to work, which isn't something that, say, Silhouette owners go through. And what really kind of sparked this, the article that I read, is that fundamentally the devices are low-end CNC machining.
Mm-hmm.
It's, CNC machining without the big giant form of it.
Right.
It's the same technology concept, or same technological concept, as you have in major manufacturing to cut out parts from sheet metal.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the same technology you're fundamentally using to make a 3D printer.
Right.
It's not that different. Now, on the 3D printer side, it's just the difference of a Z-axis.
Right.
So you have X and Y. Welcome back to high school math. Welcome back to Cartesian coordinates. Everything's built on an XY axis. When you get into 3D printing, it's X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So the other story that we wanted to talk about fairly quickly.
Oh, yes.
Is apparently someone didn't watch, I believe it's Cheer Up or something. What was the big cheer movies?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, but then again, I think they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone watched those movies a little too closely. Someone's also maybe a relative of Tanya Harding. But
or got inspired by her books.
Yeah.
She wrote a couple books and profited off of her saga. But apparently this mother in Pennsylvania went and done something called deep faking of other people on the cheer team to get them off the cheer team so that her daughter would get the head spot. Now, this is not football cheerleading. This is not concert cheerleading. This is competition cheerleading. So this is a big ordeal. And it also causes in a lot of worries here, because if a cheerleading mom can do it, what's stopping people from deep faking the employee that they don't like into a compromising video?
Well, and here's the other thing with the deep fake concept. What this is, and let's break this down. All right, so tabloid journalists for years have been using images that either look like celebrities, are celebrities totally out of context. Like, they've pasted like someone's head on someone else's body. Like we've seen this all over the internet. What's happening, and those are fakes. Like those are normally clearly demonstrable fakes. Absolutely 100%. You can get someone in there to look at the image and tell you what all's wrong with it. Like the pixel count on this portion of the image doesn't match this. The shadow is wrong here. If the light source is like over here, you can go through and typically take a fake image apart and figure out what someone did. What's happening with deep fakes is you're actually getting into a situation in which software is smart enough to be able to detect the facial structure in an image. And right now, our biggest concern is video. Images are bad enough. Like, that's a little easier to do. Video is a lot harder to do. But even at that, what we're dealing with is the ability for software, which, cute as it is when you can, paste like, filters on yourself in apps, as cute as that is, and you can become a talking llama or whatever, as cute as that is, it's the same basic principles to move someone's face or to move someone's body in a photo for a computer, for AI to make these movements, so that you can move arms and you can move faces, and you can take a mouth that didn't have a cigarette in it and put a cigarette in it.
Well, hold on a second. Let's show them what we're talking about.
Okay.
Let me get it set up. As you see here, we think we're seeing Tom Cruise. This isn't Tom Cruise. This is a Tom Cruise fake. Yeah.
And realistically, the actor, like, so to speak, at this point, the actor in that situation only needs to look a fair amount like Tom Cruise. General height, general proportions, perhaps general hair color, just enough that you can literally paste in Tom Cruise's face. Right. From there, you can start sampling audio of things that Tom Cruise has actually said. This is where on the video side it can get a little wonky. You can get the motion looking pretty good, but on the voice side, it can be really, really hard to get the same like qualities of, say, Tom Cruise's voice.
Right.
So that everything sounds natural and like he's legitimately saying it.
Right.
Typically right now, the best versions of those are very short clips.
Right. He's going viral on TikTok. But no. So this mother deep faked the girls drinking naked.
Well, drinking, nudity, smoking. There were a few others. And then additionally went the further direction of sending the fakes to them. Went one step beyond that and like started harassing and bullying these kids too.
Right.
Yeah. So it's an across the board, like someone didn't watch last Tuesday's show and didn't listen to last Tuesday's guest at all, ever, anywhere.
Needs the book.
Yeah. Like this is bullying. This is the parent bullying on behalf of their child.
Yeah.
Like they are so like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like this isn't just like, toddlers and tiaras, and some of the moms are a little witchy. And I don't mean that to have a W. But this is like down and out, like Tanya Harding level, like I will take you out of this competition. Like you will not, like I don't care if you're better, prettier, whatever, I will take you down.
Right. But this causes even more concerns because video evidence has always been the gold standard. If it's on video, you done it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's on video, it happened. Now did it? Now would it?
There's been a lot of issues around that theory. Right now, on video at least, it's very, very hard to get a truly undetectable deep fake. Typically, it's you can get a close approximation. And there have been some people who have demonstrated how close the approximation can be. But ultimately, what you're going to end up with is a problem, especially if you're trying to deep fake an activity. Like, for instance, if you're trying to deep fake someone, using drugs and getting high as a video, and like, you're gonna have a problem, like with if you're trying to get, for instance, someone buying drugs, you're gonna have a problem there. Those are, like, for instance, the words you might use to buy drugs probably aren't going to be part of someone's common, like, speech.
Right.
Like, you're going to have to source speech from somewhere.
Right.
That's typically where it starts to fall apart.
Right. But let's say Sony owns the license to, I don't know, Whitney Houston.
Yes.
They could deep fake new release music from her.
Yes. Well, and at that point, it's not called a fake anymore.
Yeah.
At that point, it's called a reanimation.
Right.
This has actually happened.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I want to say Sinatra.
I don't know about Sinatra. I know that they've done a 3D of Whitney Houston. They've done a 3D of Sinatra. They've done one, I believe, of another another rapper.
Yeah.
They've also, in the new Star Wars, brought back a character that's dead.
There is a fair amount of this starting to happen and this is kind of where the deep fake concept branches off from.
Right.
Is that our ability through computer graphics and artificial intelligence has gotten good enough that it is no longer, it's actually becoming more and more possible to very, very carefully create a situation that did not occur.
Right.
With words and action that looks real.
Right.
Now, there have been issues with each of those. It is one, very time consuming. The actual hardware required for video is very expensive. Because at that point, you're literally having a computer do everything.
Right.
Now, when you're talking about faking images, to some degree, it's not impossible. You don't need the best hardware. But then there's also the question of whether this article is properly using the word deep fake.
Right.
Because again, we're talking all about minors, so I'm sure that none of the images have been released, and probably never will be.
The show had the vaping one, and I think that's all it had.
Okay. Well, and for the most part, it's going to be really hard to release those without divulging the identity of the minor that's involved, as well as the fact that you're going to ultimately get what she wanted out of it anyway. Right. Is that these images will now be associated with this person's identity.
Right.
Which
and she's only getting 2 misdemeanor charges.
Yeah.
I just don't get that. I think the laws have got to catch up.
In a lot of ways, the laws that are going to apply here have more to do with kind of the fact that technology has gotten just a fair jump ahead of the legalities. In that what these are ultimately dealing with are the same concepts that tabloid journalism gets into,
Right.
which is slander and libel.
Right.
Because ultimately, if you go back a few years or, get a really bad hack job, Photoshop job done online, that's all it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's slander and libel. It's mischaracterization of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Which on the surface and in that context, if you're pasting someone else's body on someone else's head to do something, and you can technically dig in and disprove it, then it's not as big of a deal.
Right.
It's when it becomes totally convincing and it's very, very, very hard to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a much bigger problem than, the science teacher's head pasted on the porn star's body.
Right.
Because that has actually been a large amount of where some of the stuff has come through at.
Right.
Is people doing, especially with women, revenge pictures, or basically pictures meant to harm someone's life or livelihood. And, the classic case being, putting the chemistry teacher or the math teacher or the whatever teacher you hate,
Mm-hmm.
their head on a porn star's body, and there you go.
Right.
Now she's slutty McMath teacher, which most school boards don't take well to, as we've seen.
Right.
School boards aren't even taken well, at least not that Catholic one, to, a parent that legitimately had an OnlyFans account.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't even part of the faculty and staff.
Right.
So, yeah, most school systems don't do well with slutty McTeacher.
Exactly. Well, I think this is something we're going to have to monitor and keep watching as the story develops. I'm hoping that they soothe her ass, because this is where it has to go as the civil.
And I think it most definitely will go into civil. I don't know that it's necessarily going to create a lot of money for them. My hope would be, though, that it does encourage a large change to the laws, because this being a misdemeanor, if the quality of the images is good enough that telling them from reality is truly difficult,
Right.
then one, she has totally wasted her talents, or she has paid for someone who should not have used their talents in that way.
Apparently, she was able to use a cell phone and a filter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, that's what is being released. So it's like, oh, dear gods. All right, y'all. It's been a long show. It's been a great show. I hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation. And Vanna, take it away.
Alrighty. Well, of course, we want to thank our baristas. We love our Patreon supporters. And I'm just waiting for this to scroll back around. So we do want to thank Beverly Walker, Mika G, Kathy, Mary Winfield, Brenda Bryant, and Ashley Guest. If you would like to become a barista or support the show, please make sure you visit PCSPnetwork.com, where you can learn more about us, the show, how to become a supporter, and all of that good stuff.
Yes. Y'all guys have a great night. We will see you Friday night with Mountain Bears, and we're going to be taking on the Catholic Church. We'll start with the Pope and work our way down, because they've got some issues. Until then, good night, y'all. Sleep well. Wear your mask. Wash your hands.
Absolutely. Bye.